jQuery provides numerous methods for attaching event handlers to elements. Each of these methods ultimately calls the base method of on. The bind method is used to attach event handlers to elements that currently exist on the page. For static pages, this method will work just fine. Here's the syntax for the bind method. Remember that we only had to pass the handler function as a parameter to the shorthand methods. That's because each name indicated the event for which it would attach. The bind method is generic and can be used to attach a handler for any event type. The event type is passed as a string in the first parameter, and the handler function is passed as the second parameter. This is the syntax most commonly used. The unbind method is used to remove an event handler that has been attached with the bind method. The most common syntax looks like this. Just the name of the event type is all that's generally specified. In the event of dynamically loaded content, the bind method will not attach the event handler to newly loaded elements, even ones that match the selector. The live method can be used for that. Please note, I choose to pronounce the method spelled L-I-V-E as live, since it makes sense to me to think of it as the opposite of die. There are some who are adamant that the correct pronunciation is live, as in alive. Honestly, it really doesn't matter. Until jQuery becomes voice activated, we can refer to it verbally any way we choose, as long as we spell it L-I-V-E. The purpose of live is to attach event handlers to any existing elements that match the selector, as well as any elements that may be added in the future. This is a very powerful feature of jQuery. We can specify event handlers for elements that are not currently part of the page. How is this accomplished? The live method doesn't actually attach an event handler to the selected element. It attaches an event handler to the document object by default and listens for events that get bubbled up the DOM tree. Once the event bubbles to the document object, jQuery looks for any elements that match the selector that was used with the live method. Then the event handler is processed for each of those elements. That's why it will work for elements that have been dynamically loaded after the live method was originally called. The die method is used to remove any event handler attached with the live method. The delegate method is a more robust version of live. It handles the event attachment and delegation much more efficiently than live and plays more nicely than live when included in method chains. Like the live method, the delegate method attaches event handlers farther up the DOM. The point of attachment is specified by the object that the method is called upon. That's why the delegate method takes an additional selector parameter that the other event methods do not. The undelegate method is used to remove event handlers attached with the delegate method. Now that we've talked about bind, live, delegate, unbind, die, and undelegate, it's time to mention that these methods have been superseded by the on and off methods. The on method is used instead of bind, live, and delegate. The off method is used instead of unbind, die, and undelegate. Behind the scenes, jQuery ultimately calls the on method whenever bind, live, or delegate is used. Likewise, it ultimately calls the off method when unbind, die, or undelegate is used. At some point in the future, support for bind and live will probably be dropped to keep the library as small as possible. We'll use on and off in our examples. The on method is called just like bind and live. We can use the on method instead of bind and live simply by changing the method name. To make it behave like the delegate method, a little tweaking is required. It can accept an additional parameter that specifies the selector to use when determining if a bubbled event should be processed. When the on method is called with this signature, it behaves just like the delegate method. Please note, the selector and event type parameters are reversed from what is used in the delegate method. When changing delegate methods to use the on method instead, we need to make sure and reverse the first two parameters. Since the parameter list for on is compatible with bind and live, you can start making use of the on method any place that is currently using those methods. The off method works just like unbind and die. The last method in the list is one. This attaches an event handler to an element that will only be processed one time. Once the handler is processed, jQuery automatically executes an off method. So let's work on some code to see how to make use of these methods.